just going to look at adding and subtracting two graphs. So if you look at y equals x squared, and then you look at y equals x. So we're going to think about that as f of x equals x squared, and g of x equals x. Now we're not going to think of that in an algebraic way. What I would like to do is to look at that in a geometrical way. So we've got our graph there, and on here we're going to draw. I'm going to make this 1, 1. Right, 1, 1 can be right there. So that means that it's minus 1, minus 1. So this is my parabola here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw my line through 1, 1, 0, 0. Like that. Keep it going. And I'll keep the blue graph going up like that, and this one going up like that. Okay, so what we're going to focus on doing is drawing f of x plus g of x. And we're going to look at it, do it by looking at the graph without even looking at the equation. So when we're doing that, we're going to add the y value of f of x, which is the blue graph, and the y value of g of x. So you start off, and let's start on the left-hand side. So we're starting over here, and we're going to add the y value of the blue graph with the y value of the yellow graph. Now, if you looked at the different colours in those, basically, if you look at the blue graph, and I draw a line there, say in purple, that's quite a big line, and this one's a small one. So that's like a small negative, and this one here is like a big positive. So when you add like say that number up there was 9, and then I'm going to add on, say this one down here was minus 3, I end up with a positive. I end up with 6. So that means that my new graph, which I'm going to draw in orange, would be like somewhere here. As if you took the purple one and you took away that green, the green line there. Okay, so if you move along and you go to a little bit less, it is about there. And then if you look at the green one down below, they're nearly the same size. So, it could be 1 and minus 1, couldn't it? So if you did plus 1 minus 1, you end up with 0. So when you add those together, that means it's going to cross the x-axis. Because say this was 1 and that was minus 1, when you add them together you will get 0. So far you've got the graph. You could estimate it's coming down there in the orange. Now what happens below? So if you now look at this again, and we're going to do that in purple, that there is a really little bit, and then we have green underneath. So in purple on top we have a little purple, and then we have a little green. Okay, so I think the line is a bit further, bit bigger. So it's it's coming down here under here, but there is a point as you go up. You'll see that the purple will meet, and the purple and the green will meet. The two graphs will meet, and that will be where g of x equals 0 and f of x equals 0. So when you add the two zeros together, you end up with 0. That's why it's cutting right there, and just a little dot there in black on the x-axis. When you get to the other side, you can see what happens is the blue graph, which I'm doing in purple, looks like that. So it's all positive, and then the line, which I'm going to do in green, you can see the line, it's positive again. So when I'm adding these on, like say I go to any point here, I'm actually adding on, the blue graph, which is positive, and then I'm going to add on the yellow graph, which I'm now doing in green. So it's two positives. So that means it ends up being something really positive. See up the top here? So the line would have to come up here, and you can see that that is actually a parabola. Now, if I did do that algebraically, can you see that y is x squared plus x? That's actually another parabola, and if you factorize it, you can see that it ends up being roots are 0 and minus 1. And if you look at this graph, that's approximately what we have actually drawn here. Parabola goes approximately through minus 1, back up through 0, and it's that black graph that looks up there. And that new graph there would be f of x plus g of x, which is the required graph that we were trying to draw. Okay, so I'm now going to look at drawing the cubic and y equals x plus 6. And we're going to look at drawing f of x plus g of x. So our algebraic equation would be x cubed plus x plus 6. So I've got the y equals x cubed drawn on there. I'm now going to just do a line like this, and that one's going to be my y equals x plus 6. So we're going to approximate what this graph looks like. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by, if we look at this, see how we've got that green one, and then we're going to add on the blue one, which goes heaps down. So that's like adding two negatives, isn't it? So two negatives, it's going to, it's going to be right down the bottom there somewhere. Doesn't really matter where, but right down the bottom. And then when you keep coming up, you get to this point here, right? And that's like adding a 0, and you're adding a 0 onto whatever the blue graph is. So it's still right down the bottom there. So that's actually not going to do much there. That's just going to add it on. And it's just going to keep, it's going to sit somewhere on that cubic graph. Okay, so the question is, at what point would this blue graph here, at what point does the blue graph, like that blue graph, at what point does it equal what's under the green graph? So let's just draw a line to where we think maybe, possibly, I think maybe there and there. You can see they're nearly the same. So if we come back up here, see that's where they're nearly the same. So when they're nearly the same, what will happen is that's where it's going to actually cut the x-axis. So it's going to be very, very steep down here. And then you look at here as we're going up. Can you see the little bit of blue there and that big green? That means it's a bigger green. So that means when you're drawing it, it's going to come above here. Okay, so that's all good. Then we're going to add on. You can see here we have 0 from the blue graph. We're going to add that onto the green graph. So that means we're going to come through there, aren't we? And then if we keep going, we've got, just going to look at it through shading. So we've got this green graph, which is here, and we are adding it onto the blue graph, which is here. So it means a positive and a positive. So it can only get bigger. Like it can only come up here and get bigger. So I would say, oops, sorry, I need it in orange. I would say it is now coming up here and it's getting bigger. And then even the next one where we two intersect, it's just going to go up and up and up. And it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's basically what your graph would look like. Up here, and then it goes up quite rapidly because you're adding on two big values. So in all of this, every time when you're doing it, all you're doing is you are adding an x value, and then you are adding a y value. Sorry, you're adding a y value from one graph, and you're adding the y value from that graph to the y value from the other graph. So, any of these, you've got y value blue with y value green. And if one's positive and one's negative, depending on what's bigger, if it's a bigger negative plus a smaller positive, then it ends up being, like if it's a big negative and a small positive, it ends up being a big negative, so that means it's below the x-axis. But if it's the other way around, if it's a big positive plus a small negative, then it ends up being above the axis, the x-axis, in drawing it. There is one more concept I just want to clear up really quickly, and that's the fact that if you've, so say I've got, like say I have this polynomial, let's go 4, 0, that, and say on there I draw the line y equals, let's go y equals a half x, like it's not quite so steep, so yeah, that would be it there. Now, what I want to do is not draw, like if that's, that one's g of x and the blue one's f of x, I want to draw f of x minus g of x. I don't want to draw f of x plus g of x. So if I did minus g of x, then what's going to happen is the orange graph, which is g of x, that's going to change, and that's actually going to flip around, and then we have this graph here. So now when we go to add the x and the y values, so if I shade underneath the green curve here, I'd be adding that. So anything green, I'm adding all of those, the green ones. So first a positive green, going from big to small, and then small to big. And I'm going to be adding that to the blue graph. So under the blue graph, the first thing I'm adding is just here, all of that, and that there, and then this blue that's up here. Okay, so I flip it because it is a negative g of x, and then I'm adding that on. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So what do we have? So if we start here, see on the blue graph we have a fairly big one, and on the green graph we have a small one. So that means the overall effect, it would be a bigger negative. And you keep going on like that until the green equals the blue graph, and at that point that's where it'll cross the axis. When you get to this point here, that's going to be a double, like when you come here you got the blue and then you have the green at this point, so you just got to double that size, so it's going further up there, and it keeps doing that because if you look along you've got green and then you have blue at that next point, so that's still going to be a bit bigger up. But at what point does it start to come down? If you look at that, the green gets very small until you're actually adding on 0 here. So it's going to go right up there, come down, add on 0. And what will happen on the other side? Okay, so we have the blue, which is a negative, and we're going to add that to a negative green. So that means you're just going to get a bigger negative. So it's going to come down here. And then we're going to keep going. So we're going to add a green, a negative green to a negative blue. So that means we're going to get something here. Right, so that's all right. And then we get to a point where we are going to add a 0 blue onto just a green. So, you know, it's coming back down here. It's going to do that. And there's going to be some point where the blue, here, the blue will equal the green, but then the blue is going to actually take over because it's a curve and a parabola. So it's going to cut, and the blue parabola, see this one here, that's going to, this part here, that's going to go up more rapidly than the green line. So overall effect would be it's going to pull away and it's going to be positive. So it actually looks like this polynomial. So I'm just going to go through it in black. That would be your actual resulting curve of f of x minus g of x. Once you've got this straight line, which came from flipping it, and then you have this parabola thing here, and you add them together.